The Greeks produced theories of the greatest sophistication, especially in math and astronomy. But somehow they almost never sought evidence for their theories. So strange. Specifically, they rarely conducted controlled experiments and instead used reason, which was actually more like armchair philosophy. Perhaps the world is made of 4 elements. Perhaps the world is made of atoms. Perhaps the world is made of geometric figures. It all sounded good, but without experimentation, there's just no way to find out what is true. One exception to the rule was Ptolemy. Unlike the other Greeks, he built a number of devices to study the nature of light. One of the first controlled quantitative experiments in history. The Greek philosopher Aristotle was the first in world history to create a true scientific method to gain knowledge. He believed that all knowledge comes from observation, from the senses. But notoriously, he didn't always practice as he preached. The main problem was that Aristotle relied mostly on passive observation instead of designing controlled experiments. But this changed with Ptolemy, the Greek who came closest to being a modern scientist. Ptolemy conducted a number of experiments to study reflection on mirrors, using a bronze disc, various metal mirrors, and a sighting tube. And he also designed devices to study refraction, the change in direction of light as it moves to another substance. He studied light from air to glass, air to water, and water to glass. But he wasn't correct on all counts. First of all, he curiously believed that we see because vision rays emerge from our eyes and feel the surrounding, as though they were the antennae of insects. And in his experiments with refraction, he deliberately fudged all his data to make it fit a simple mathematical pattern, making him somewhat of an armchair philosopher after all. So we got a lot to talk about. Let's start. Hey, good to see you. This is Stephan, author of In Search of the Sublime. On this World History channel, we'll trace humanity's relentless pursuit of scientific truth, moral excellence and enlightenment. You'll meet anyone from Mesopotamian astronomers and Indian yogis to Greek philosophers and Enlightenment scientists. And you'll meet them firsthand using primary sources, giving you valuable insights that transcend the surface level understanding you get on other channels. So go check it out for yourself. Let's start. The Greek philosopher Aristotle was the first in world history to create a true scientific method to gain knowledge. He believed that all knowledge comes from observation through the senses, and this leads to experience, which will eventually allow us to make generalizations about how the world works. Yet he notoriously didn't always practice as he preached. His lack of experimentation famously showed when Aristotle wrote that heavy objects fall faster than light ones. And this sounds right based on our day-to-day experience. But a simple experiment can show that both objects hit the ground at the same time when air friction is negligible. So what exactly was the problem here? The problem was that he forgot one element. He mostly used passive observation to gain knowledge, instead of controlled experiments designed for the sole purpose of understanding a phenomenon. But this changed with the great polymath Ptolemy. Ptolemy is best known for his Almagest, a book describing the most sophisticated model of the solar system of the ancient world, and which allowed astronomers to predict the complex motion of the planets with incredible accuracy. And he also wrote the Geography, which was the best Greek attempt to map the world. But for a moment back to the Almagest on the solar system. It depended on accurate observation of the stars, but not so much on experimentation, as we cannot directly influence the motion of the stars ourselves. All we can do is watch and record. But this was not the case for Ptolemy's optics, his study of light and vision. For in his optics he designed experimental equipment. And to understand what he did, we first have to understand his theory of vision. Very curiously, Ptolemy had no idea that vision depends on light moving into our eyes. Instead, he believed that vision rays emerge from our eyes and feel the surroundings as though they are antennae of insects. And because these rays are emitted by the eyes, it is called the emission theory of vision. But Ptolemy, of course, did believe in light from the sun, from a fire, etc. And for Ptolemy, curiously, both light rays and vision rays move in straight lines, and they also both reflect, for instance against mirrors, and they both refract when moving from one substance to another. So on paper, he should have been very close to realizing that vision rays were redundant, because light rays can perform all the functions that his visual rays could. But somehow he never got there. And by the way, this is not the only time that Ptolemy missed the obvious. That is obvious for us now today. For instance, in his work on the solar system, he noted that the outer planets make additional circles of exactly 1 year as they orbit the sun, without realizing this is because we see them from the Earth that is itself moving around the sun in 1 year. Ptolemy just notes this coincidence, that those planets make an extra circle also in 365 days, without trying to explain this coincidence. But now back to the emission theory. It sounds ridiculous to the modern reader, but it was supported by great thinkers, and not only Ptolemy, also the great mathematician Euclid. And to be fair, the theory isn't completely without merit. For Euclid claimed that these rays were emitted from the eye in the shape of a cone. And since the radius of a cone becomes larger with distance, this allowed him to understand mathematically why objects look smaller when further away. That is to say, it explained perspective. You can easily see this in this drawing. A tree nearby doesn't fit in the cone, while a tree further away easily fits in there, and as a result it looks smaller. Finally, we have to mention that Ptolemy did believe that light played a role in vision, because without light it is dark and we can't see anything. But he assumed that light was just to brighten the surfaces of objects, allowing them to be seen then by his vision rays. Now we understand his theory of vision, we can also understand his experimental setup. The first apparatus to measure reflection contained a bronze disc, various metal mirrors and a sighting tube. Ptolemy placed a sighting tube on the disc and looked through it at the center point of the mirror. He then moved a marker until this marker was visible to his eye, and then he recorded the result. Then he changed the angle of incidence, you can see it over here, and each time moved the marker until it became visible again, and then recorded the associated angle of reflection, this angle here. And he then repeated the experiments, not only for a flat mirror, but also for a concave and a convex mirror, giving the same results. Let's read the text. Experiment 3. Let a round bronze plaque of moderate size, such as the one in the figure, be set up, and let A be in the center. Then let a small circle be inscribed at the center point A. Now let 3 thin, small, square, straight sheets of iron be formed, and let one of its sides be polished so that it appears as a clear mirror. Then let a small diopter, a sighting tube, be mounted upon AL, and assume then that we view with either of our eyes through that diopter, which is placed on point L on line AL, and that we direct our line of sight towards the actual pin of each of the mirrors. Accordingly, if we slide a small colored marker on the plaque surface, right there, until it appears to us to lie on the same line of sight with A, then point L Point A and the image of the marker that is seen in the three mirrors will appear to lie on a single line. If therefore we mark the point at which the colored marker stands on the black surface, that is point M, and if we draw out a straight line AM, we'll find that arc BM is equal to arc BL. And since that is the case, angle LAB will be equal to angle MAB. And line AL thus delineates the visual ray incident to the mirror surface from the eye, whereas line AM delineates the visual ray reflected from the mirror's surface to the visible object. Today we would conclude that the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. That's what I teach in my physics classes. But notice here that Ptolemy is speaking of vision rays here. He is not aware that light is reaching from the marker via the mirror into his eyes. He just thinks that light is only needed to light up the marker so that his vision rays from his eye to the mirror to the marker can perceive that marker. And interestingly, today when I perform this experiment in class, we perform it without any reference to vision. But instead we use visible light rays, as you can see here. No sighting tube involved. He then applies his law, for instance to find the image H of a point E in the mirror AG. If our eye is at D, a vision ray will reflect off the mirror from B to E, but we will perceive the point E at point H, behind the mirror. Ptolemy's next experiment was more complicated. It dealt with refraction, which involves a change in the direction of light when it propagates from one substance to another, as you can see here. And he tested light going from air to glass, air to water, and water to glass. In the first experiment, he looks into an empty bowl from point A. But because of the obstruction BZ, he can see a coin located at point G. But then water is added to hide EZ. And now the vision ray from point A changes direction on the surface of the water. And as a result, it does reach point G, where the coin is located. However, the eye sees the coin as though it is located on line AD, specifically at point K. So the coin is visible now, and it appears higher than it actually is. Ptolemy writes nearer to the water's surface. And here we see this effect in real life. For the next experiment, Ptolemy used the same bronze disc from his experiment with reflection. But it is now placed upright in a vessel. We read, "Let all of the semicircle BGD of the plaque but nothing beyond that lie under water." And we continue, "Let a small colored marker be placed at Z and E. And now we line up both markers at Z and E along a line of sight from the eye so that they appear to coincide. And we then move a small thin peg along the opposite arc GD under water until the end of the peg appears to lie directly in the line with the previous two markers. And moreover, if we join lines ZE and EH, angle AEZ is greater than angle GEH, which cannot be the case unless there is refraction. And then he gives us the following result, given in this table. We see on the left side the angle of incidence, and on the right side the resulting angle of refraction. We see that he moves the sighting tube from 0 to 10 degrees, and the measured refracted ray then went from 0 to 8 degrees, as you can see here. Then he takes steps of 10 degrees to 20, 30, 40 and so on. And the angle added to the refracted ray, according to his table, is each time half a degree lower. First we add 7.5 degrees, then 7 degrees, then 6.5 degrees, then 6 degrees and so on. But strangely, these are not the actual values that you would find if you do the experiment. Instead, they follow a more complicated relation based on the sine function. So it seems that Ptolemy fudged his data to make it fit a simple mathematical pattern. So even in the most famous example of a Greek experiment, philosophical speculation about what the data should be like trumped what Ptolemy actually saw with his own eyes. Next, Ptolemy did the same experiment, but now with a semi-cylinder of glass instead of water. And these are the results he found. He now found different values, but again with that same pattern, to add half a degree less each time. And then he put glass on top and added water on the bottom, measuring refraction between water and glass. And here the same pattern becomes visible. So literally all three of these tables are fudged. He then applied refraction in a number of instances. Here, for instance, we see him explain how the atmosphere of the Earth can cause stars to appear on a different location when they are visible closer to the horizon. The star here is located at K, and light from that star refracts as it enters the atmosphere at D, causing it to appear for a person at A to be at point Z instead of K. And finally, we mention the following. The correct mathematical law was eventually indirectly discovered by the Persian scientist Ibn Sal at the Baghdad court in 984 AD. In a text called On Burning Mirrors and Lenses, he noticed that the ratio between the refracted ray CE, drawn till it met the line GH, and the ray without any refraction CH to the same line GH was constant. So if we divide this distance by this distance, we always get the same number, no matter the angle of incidence. That is, for a particular material. And for the physicist, this constant ratio is equal to 1 divided by n, with n being the refraction index. And using some trigonometry, we can rewrite this ratio as the following formula. And this formula was later discovered by the Dutch astronomer Willebrord Snellius of the 17th century. And it is named Snell's law, which I still teach in my classrooms to this day. And this is the closest that the ancient Greeks ever got to a scientific method. The next step were taken in the Arabic world, as we saw a preview of in the case of Ibn Sal. And this will be our topic for the next lecture. Here we'll find that the Muslim Ibn al-Haytham conclusively disproved Ptolemy's vision rays in favor of light rays. And he even came up with a word for experiment. And his work reads like a science textbook, unlike any other work written before his time. But that is for the next time. For now, if you want to know more about the history of science, or any other topic from world history, then read my book In Search of the Sublime. You can read it completely for free on worldhistorybook.com, or you can buy a physical copy on Amazon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.